Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Darshawn McAway. You're tuned in to WOW Podcast. By all means, go to wowpodcast.me. That's WOWPODCAST.me. Now, today we have a special guest. We have Bob Brill, and he's here to talk to us about his latest book, Lancer, Hero of the West. Bob, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Darshawn. Real good. Matter of fact, got a lot of things going, so we can get right to it as far as I'm concerned.
Great deal. So tell me, what is this book about?
Well, this is actually the sixth book in the Lancer Hero of the West series, and it's slotted actually to be number 2. And the reason for that is I have a new publisher, and there were 5 previous books. There will be 10, and this is number 6. But I kind of slotted it in to follow the first book. And you can read any of the books individually, separately. There's not a trail or a continuous theme through any of the books, although it's all about the same character. Lancer, Hero of the West. Lancer is a good guy gunslinger who works out of Tombstone in the early 1880s. And he's a guy who takes assignments everywhere else in the country to either solve crimes or help people or do whatever he's going to do for a fee. But he's a wealthy guy, so the fee doesn't really matter that much. It's more of, he's a really good guy. He's got a lot of high principles. He hangs out in Tombstone with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and Virgil Earp, and is a nemesis of the Cowboys, Johnny Ringo and Curly Bill Brocious, and all the guys that were in Tombstone at that particular point in time. And this particular story, each book is called Lancer, Hero of the West, The Something Affair, and that something is the city. There's been Prescott, Arizona, Los Angeles, Santa Fe, El Paso, New Orleans, and this takes place in Broken Bow, Nebraska, which is the heart of cattle raising country at that time. And he's hired by the Cattlemen's Association to go to Broken Bow to solve a series of cattle rustling situations that happen up there, and it becomes very entangled, very entwined, and people get murdered and stuff like that.
So I don't want to breeze past something that you mentioned earlier. Now, I want to make sure that I heard this correctly. You have 10 books are coming out, or they're in the works?
In the works. There will be 10 eventually. Like I said, this is number 6. I write about one a year, and this year is going to be a little bit of a crunch time because I try to have them done to debut them in April. And the reason for that is I always do the Santa Clarita Cowboy Festival every April, and I do the weekend there. And of course, this year we didn't do it because of COVID, but hopefully next year we will. And but eventually there will be 10. The one I'm going to start writing now, I really haven't decided on the city where he's going to go. I did think of Deadwood, but Deadwood in the 1880s was past its prime, so I don't really want to go there. And he may go to San Francisco. He may go to someplace else. I haven't decided yet. And I've been a little late on starting this because I'm in the middle of filming a documentary on another subject, and I just finished recording the audio book for Lancer, Hero of the West, The Broken Bow Affair. Now,
with these 6 books that are out, how do you find that time to make them? They sound like they intertwine, but they also stand alone. How are you finding that time to connect these stories? Like, what's that process for you?
Well, the basic is he's got a new adventure every time. And the idea is that's a standalone book. And when I write my Lancer Hero of the West novels, my goal is to write to about exactly, if you are flying from New York to Los Angeles or Los Angeles to New York, you can pick up one of these books and read it. If you're a diligent reader, read it on the flight and be finished with it at the end of the flight. And when you're going back, you pick up another one. So my goal has always been with the Lancer Heroes of the West series to make it a 5-hour read if you read it straight through, or maybe 6. And they run about 200 pages, which is something I shoot for. And the way I've structured the stories is, like you said, they're standalones. They are kind of formulaic. In other words, Lancer always works out of Tombstone. He goes to the place that he's going to go to. He's got to travel there. And on the travels there, he always meets a legendary hero or a legendary character from the West. He may meet, well, in the previous book, he met up with Geronimo, and there was an incident with Geronimo, as well as another character who I won't mention. That was in the book to El Paso. This one, he meets up with two other legendary characters. Now, the thing about legendary characters in the West, they're legendary because they told their own stories. They made up stuff about themselves. So it's pretty easy to entwine them in. And then each book, I unveil something more about Lancer's past. Now, Lancer's not his real name. He came from something else. He was a Civil War veteran, youngest officer ever appointed on the battlefield. He came from a rich family. His father was a merchant, and he traveled the world. So growing up, so there's all these things that Lancer does and is, and each book I reveal a little bit more to keep that interest going, so that you kind of want to find out more about Lancer as the books go along.
So what's your driving factor into writing these stories? Like, what's that moment for you where you're just so motivated and you say, okay, I got to write this story down? What happens for you in that time?
Well, I grew up in the 50s and 60s when almost everything on television was a Western. And my father was a big fan of the Westerns. I became a big fan of the Westerns because we would sit down and watch these together, right? And I go back, and matter of fact, when I work out every day, I do about 30 minutes on the treadmill. I watch old episodes of my real hero, The Lone Ranger.
Okay.
And so that's 24, 25 minutes. I know the time frame. It's mindless, easy to follow stories that don't get too complicated. I don't have to think too much, and they're pretty much the same. So the motivation really was me and my dad. And I've designed this to be, like you said, 10 books, and I know how the 10th one's going to end, which I can't tell you, obviously, but I know how that's going to end, and I know where that's going to go. It's the other three that I've still got to figure out yet. But the motivation comes from the times with my father. I'm an historian. I mean, I love history, whether it's, a matter of fact, the documentary we're doing is on the 50th anniversary of the Sylmar earthquake, which I was a senior at Sylmar High School at the time, and in 1971. So, and coming up in February is the 50th anniversary. So that was kind of a passion project, but it's history, and there's a lot of history involved in that, and lessons learned. Because to me, that's what history is. It's, you learn from the past so you don't make the same mistakes, although we constantly do, because we forget about history. So that historical aspect for me and my dad is what drives me to write the Lancer Hero of the West series.
Now, it sounds like you have a great relationship with your dad. Is Lancer based off of your dad?
No. My father passed away about 37 years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
It's okay. He lived a good, long life, and he was a great dad, and loved it a lot. He was a very quiet man, but, he just loved the Westerns. But he told me when he was growing up, he read every Zane Grey novel ever, at least once. And so that's where he got his love for the Westerns. And then I guess sort of osmosis or whatever, gave that to me. And I loved the Westerns growing up. My favorite films are Westerns, High Noon, and the Horse Soldiers, and of course everybody's got to love Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
If you don't love Blazing Saddles, you don't love a Western of any kind.
Yeah.
But so those three are probably my three favorite Westerns. But and the thing about Westerns is you can be watching Netflix. No, forget Netflix. You can be watching HBO or whatever cable channel, and you sit there and you're just channel surfing, and a Western comes on that maybe you've seen 100 times, and you watch it for a few minutes, and you watch it till the end because there's those scenes that you're so familiar with that are so not real, but they're Americana, I guess you might want to say, and they're just good scenes. And I'm a screenwriter, so I enjoy this so much. And my wife talked to me the other day. She goes, I think she was hinting that I was stuck in the past because I was watching The Lone Ranger while I was working out. And it's not. It's sort of just an easy fallback to take your mind away from all the other things in life. You know, and that's one of the things I love about Westerns, is it's a different era, it's a different time. And, you know, sure, the stories were all made up and they're bigger and most of the movies you see are not anywhere like the real story. Tombstone was. I mean, the Kurt Russell movie was so dead on to what happened. And it was probably the best of the stories of Wyatt Earp and those. But, that's kind of where it's at.
So let's get into that screenwriting that you mentioned.
Sure.
Can you tell some of the listeners what would be that approach or kind of that how to get someone to notice their screenplay?
That's a tough one. I'm still doing it myself. And I've written about 20 screenplays and pilots, still working on the first cell. You know, I've got 3 of them out there that are now with producers that are looking at them, and which is great. You know, you don't count on anything. But screenwriting is one of the first things an agent told me. Screenwriters don't write novels and novels don't write screenplays, which they're totally different animals. They really are. It doesn't mean you can't do it. But it usually doesn't happen that way because the novel, you got to describe pretty much everything. For the screenplay, you describe almost nothing. You know, it's all about show, not tell. Let the video show, or let the audience see what's happening rather than give them dialogue to tell them what's happening. Now, you know, I've seen some short films that had no dialogue at all. Didn't like them. You know, I think everything has to have some dialogue, but maybe not. I mean, the thing about writing screenplays, it's really difficult because it's not writing 101. It's totally different. You know, no matter how many books you read on screenplay writing, there's still the basics. And the toughest part about it all is, number one, if you get somebody to read it, for them to understand what it's about. Because they can't see a vision that you see in your head that you tried to put on paper. And since you're trying to do it with limited words and, and limited description, it's very difficult. And that's why you may submit it to 5 different producers, and all 5 will have the same answer and say they'll pass, that hated word, I'll pass. And they all may pass for different reasons. One may not have understood the story. One may have said, you know, you didn't get into it. You didn't grab me fast enough. I didn't like the dialogue. It's not for me. You know, whatever it is. So screenplay writing is very, very difficult. And for those who win Academy Awards at it and get major movies produced, it is a monumental task. And those people are extremely talented because they've grasped it.
So let's tell the audience where they could, you know, possibly follow you on social media and definitely purchase your books.
Sure. First of all, anytime you Google my name, Bob Brill, those 2 words, I come up usually 12 of the first 13 in the Google searches. If you Google Bob Brill reporter, because that's my career's been radio for almost 50 years as a newscaster and reporter. You know, if you Google that, you'll see a whole lot of different stuff about me. But of course, you can find me on Amazon. And sometimes the latest book, because I have a new publisher and they're published on their site and it's available through Amazon, it's a little difficult to find. But the other place you can always go is bobbrillbooks.com. You can always reach me through there. You can purchase any of my books through there. And you can also, just email me if you're interested in finding out more. And I write a weekly column online called Baseball in the 1960s, where I also give away a $10 trivia question every week with a Starbucks gift card. And I do a couple of podcasts. So I'm kind of out there. Or you can just go to bobbrill.com. If you go to bobbrill.com, there's links to all that other stuff, including bobbrillbooks.com or bobbrillfilms.com. So, because I do have 4 short films out there. And the latest one is a Western. They're anywhere from 9 to 18 minutes long. And that one's a good one. So, yeah, just Google me, Bob Brill, and you'll find me pretty much everywhere. But Bob Brill Books or Bob Brill Films or bobbrill.com will get me.
Now, before we wrap up, something that you mentioned earlier, why Broken Bow, Nebraska?
Well, I was looking for a city where it was out of the areas where I've been to El Paso, Los Angeles, Prescott, Arizona, New Orleans, and Santa Fe. Those are all pretty big cities in the West. Prescott not as big at the time. And I was looking for a smaller city, but I wanted to incorporate something about Cattle Kate. And Cattle Kate was a legendary figure of that time, and she spent most of her time in Wyoming and Nebraska. And I thought, there's got to be a place. I believe me, Darsha, I searched high and low for a city that existed in western Nebraska, the cattle country, at that time. It was a city. And it took me months. It literally took me months. And finally, I latched on to Broken Bow. It's just maybe 100 miles from a military outpost out there that I could incorporate. It's fairly close to the Wyoming border, where I can incorporate that part of the story. And it was big cattle country. And you had about large cattle ranches. So if I decided it was going to be a story about rustling. And more than that, it was going to be an intrigue story about corporate greed in the 1880s. And if you read the book, you'll find out more about how that is all entwined and the trail of bodies that gets left behind. And I say that, but I also know that if a teenager is fine reading these books, I'd always, because there's usually a little bit of sex in the books, not graphic anyway. But if you're a mom or a dad, and you have a teenage son who wants to read it, or a teenage daughter, I'd take a look at it first. It just might be something depending on your religious or moral beliefs, but they're pretty tame otherwise. So.
Well, I'm your host, Darshawn McAway. We're talking to author Bob Brill, and we're talking to him about his latest series, Lancer, Hero of the West. Bob, it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, Darshawn, I loved it. Thank you so much for having me here.
No problem.